The Himalayas stretch across nearly 1,500 miles from west to east. The range runs through 5 countries: Nepal, India, Bhutan, Tibet, and Pakistan. And it contains every single one of the world's 14 peaks above 8,000 meters. That number matters. 8,000 meters is the altitude where the human body starts to break down faster than it can recover. Where jet engines lose efficiency. Where the sky turns a darker shade of blue. Every mountain that crosses that line is here, in this one range. The mountains were formed when the Indian subcontinent collided with Asia around 50 million years ago. The ocean floor between them folded upward, and what is now the highest ground on Earth was once the bed of an ancient sea. Fossils of marine creatures have been found near the summit of Everest. And the process hasn't stopped. The mountains are still rising about 5 millimeters every year, while glaciers, rivers, and monsoon rains are constantly wearing them back down. It runs in both directions at once. Nearly 2 billion people depend on the rivers that begin in these mountains. The Ganges, the Indus, the Brahmaputra, the Mekong. All of them start as snowmelt and glacial runoff somewhere in this range. The Himalayas regulate the Asian monsoon and supply fresh water to more people than any other mountain system on the planet. The range is also one of the most biodiverse regions on Earth. Snow leopards hunt on the high ridges. Red pandas move through the cloud forests below. Hundreds of bird species migrate through the valleys each year. But perhaps what sets the Himalayas apart from every other mountain range is this. People didn't just settle near them. They built entire civilizations on the slopes, carved monasteries into cliffsides, and made these mountains the center of their spiritual world. For Hindus, Buddhists, Jains, and followers of the Bon tradition, the Himalayas are not just geography. They are sacred ground. That combination of extreme nature and deep human history is what makes this place unlike anywhere else. Everest stands at 8,848 meters. It is the highest point on the surface of the Earth, and it has been drawing people toward it for as long as anyone has known it was there. The mountain has 2 names that predate the Western one. In Nepali, it is Sagarmatha, meaning goddess of the sky. In Tibetan, Chomolungma, meaning mother of the universe. The name Everest came from a British surveyor in the 19th century, assigned to a peak the surveyors had catalogued as Peak 15. The local names are older and say more about how people here actually relate to the mountain. The first confirmed ascent was on the 29th of May, 1953. Edmund Hillary from New Zealand and Tenzing Norgay, a Sherpa from the Khumbu Valley, reached the summit together. The event made headlines around the world. For the Sherpa people, it was recognition of something they had always known, that these mountains could be navigated by those who understood them. The trek to Everest Base Camp begins in Lukla, a small town with an airstrip built into a mountain slope. The runway is short, ends at a drop, and operates in weather that would close most airports. From Lukla, the trail climbs through pine forest and past villages connected by stone paths. Prayer flags mark the high points. Mani walls line the trail in places. Long rows of stones carved with Buddhist prayers, built up over generations by local people and passing pilgrims. The town of Namche Bazaar, at 3,440 meters, is the main hub of the region. Most trekkers spend at least 2 nights here to acclimatize before going higher. Above Namche, trees thin out and eventually disappear. The peaks become visible: Amadablam, Lhotse, and eventually Everest itself, identifiable by the plume of cloud that streams from its summit in strong winds. Base camp sits at 5,364 meters, at the foot of the Khumbu Icefall. From here, the upper mountain is visible, but the summit is hidden behind the southwest face. The icefall shifts constantly, and the route through it is re-established every climbing season by a team of Sherpa guides. The Sherpa people have lived in the Khumbu Valley for roughly 500 years after migrating from the Kham region of eastern Tibet. They brought their language, their Buddhist faith, and a physiological adaptation to altitude that still interests scientists today. Sherpa bodies process oxygen differently at high elevation. Their mitochondria are more efficient, and their blood carries oxygen more effectively than most other human populations. This is not just fitness. It is the result of adaptation over many generations, shaped by living above 4,000 meters. For most of their history, the Sherpa economy ran on yak herding and trade. Salt and wool moved south through the mountain passes, and grain and goods came back north. Everest was simply the highest of the surrounding peaks, sacred, permanent, and never intended to be climbed. That changed in the 1950s, when Western mountaineers began arriving with ropes and ambitions. Sherpa guides became essential to every major expedition. For decades, their contribution was under-recognized. Today, the situation is different. Sherpa guides are well paid and internationally respected. Kami Rita Sherpa has summited Everest more than 29 times, a record that grows almost every season. The Khumbu Valley now has schools, hospitals, and reliable electricity from small hydro plants on glacial rivers. But the glaciers are retreating. The seasons that the Sherpa have read for generations are shifting. The changes are visible here faster than almost anywhere else on Earth. Tengboche Monastery sits at 3,867 meters on a ridge with direct views of Everest, Lhotse, and Ama Dablam. It was founded in 1916, destroyed by an earthquake in 1934, rebuilt, then badly damaged by fire in 1989, and rebuilt again. It has been knocked down twice, and twice the monks came back and started over. The monastery is the religious center of the Khumbu region. In early morning, before trekkers arrive, the silence is complete. Smoke from juniper incense drifts through open doorways. Prayer wheels turn slowly in the breeze. Inside, the walls carry murals depicting the cosmology of Tibetan Buddhism. Butter lamps cast a warm light over gilded statues. Monks chant in low voices. Each autumn, Tengboche hosts the Mani Rimdu festival, 3 days of masked dances and rituals that mark the end of the harvest season. The performances look theatrical from the outside, but for the monks performing them, every movement is part of a religious practice that has continued here for over a century. Pokhara sits on the shore of Phewah Lake, about 200 kilometers west of Kathmandu. The Annapurna Massif rises directly behind the city, and on clear mornings the peaks reflect in the surface of the lake. It is one of the more relaxed cities in Nepal. The lakeside area has cafes, guest houses, and boat rentals. People come here to rest before or after trekking, or simply because the setting is hard to leave quickly. The sacred peak of Machaputre stands at 6,993 meters. It has never been climbed. Nepal declared it permanently off-limits in 1964, considering the summit holy. It stands there intact, which gives it a different quality from the peaks that have been summited hundreds of times. From Sarangkot Hill above the city, the sunrise view over the Annapurna Range is one of the most visited viewpoints in Nepal. The light hits the snow on Annapurna 1, Annapurna 2, and Machaputre in sequence as the sun clears the horizon. Most people arrive before dawn and wait. The Annapurna Circuit is one of the classic long-distance treks in the world. The full route circles the entire Annapurna Massif, covering roughly 230 kilometers and typically taking between 2 and 3 weeks on foot. The trail passes through a wide range of environments. It starts in subtropical valleys with rice terraces and banana trees, climbs through temperate forest and alpine meadows, and crosses the Thorong La Pass at 5,416 meters. On the other side, the landscape shifts to the dry, high-altitude plateau of the Mustang region, where the terrain and culture are closer to Tibet than to the Nepal most visitors see. The cultural diversity along the route is significant. The trail passes through Gurung, Thakali, and Manangi villages, each with distinct architecture, language, and traditions. In the lower sections, Hindu temples and Buddhist prayer wheels sometimes appear within a few hundred meters of each other, a reflection of how the two traditions have coexisted in these valleys for centuries. Road construction has reached parts of the circuit in recent years, which means some sections can now be driven rather than walked. The road has made the region more accessible for local communities, but it has changed the character of those sections of the trek. Near the top of the Annapurna circuit, before the descent into the Mustang Valley, sits Muktinath at 3,710 meters. It is a temple complex that is sacred to both Hindus and Buddhists, which makes it unusual even by Himalayan standards. For Hindus, Muktinath is one of the most important Vishnu shrines in the world. Pilgrims come here to bathe in the water that flows from 108 stone spouts built into the temple wall, believing it cleanses them of accumulated sins. The water is cold at this altitude, and most people move through quickly. For Buddhists, the site is associated with Guru Rinpoche, who is said to have meditated here. A flame burns naturally from the ground nearby, fed by natural gas seeping through the rock. Both traditions have considered it sacred for centuries. The surrounding landscape is stark. At this elevation, vegetation is sparse, and the views extend across the dry Mustang Plateau toward the Tibetan border. The combination of altitude, cold, and the effort required to reach the place gives it an atmosphere that more accessible sites rarely have. Langtang Valley sits north of Kathmandu, close to the Tibetan border. It is less visited than the Everest or Annapurna regions, which means the trails are quieter and the villages feel less shaped by tourism. The valley is surrounded by a ring of peaks, with Langtang Lirung at 7,227 meters dominating the northern wall. Below the peaks, dense forest gives way to alpine meadows, where yaks graze through the summer months. The Tamang people have lived here for centuries, maintaining a culture influenced by Tibetan Buddhism. Their villages are built from stone, with prayer wheels at the entrances and monasteries on the higher ground above. In April 2015, an earthquake triggered a massive avalanche that buried the village of Langtang. More than 200 people died within seconds. Entire sections of the valley were erased. Trekkers who had been on the trail that morning came back to find nothing where there had been lodges and homes. The rebuilding took years and is still incomplete in places, but the valley has returned and the trails are open again. Walking through Langtang today, the evidence of what happened is still visible in places, in the new construction next to cleared ground, in the gaps where buildings used to be. At the upper end of the valley, Kyeonjin Gompa sits at 3,870 meters. The monastery is small, the surrounding meadows are wide, and the glacier above the valley is visible from the settlement. Most people who reach this point stay longer than they planned. Gosai Kunda sits at 4,380 meters in a high basin above the Langtang Valley. It is one of the most important pilgrimage sites in Nepal, sacred in the Hindu tradition, as a lake created by the god Shiva. The legend says that Shiva struck the ground with his trident, and water rose from the earth to cool his throat after he had consumed poison to save the universe. Whether or not the story is taken literally, it explains why thousands of pilgrims make the journey here each August during the Janai Purnima festival, bathing in the lake despite the cold and altitude. The lake itself is clear and still on calm days, reflecting the surrounding peaks and the sky above. In winter, it freezes completely. In summer, smaller lakes nearby fill with snowmelt, and the whole basin takes on a different character. The area is part of the Langtang Gosai Kunda Helambu trekking route, one of the less traveled circuits in Nepal. Red pandas have been spotted in the forests on the lower sections of the trail. Higher up, the landscape is open and exposed, with little shelter from the wind. Few places in the Himalayas combine the natural and the sacred as directly as Gosai Kunda. The lake exists because of geology, but for the people who walk for days to reach it, the reason is something else entirely. Kathmandu has been a functioning city for over 2,000 years. In that time, it has accumulated temples, palaces, stupas, and shrines in numbers that are difficult to take in all at once. The valley contains 7 UNESCO World Heritage Sites within a few kilometers of each other. Most countries have that many spread across their entire territory. The old city center is built around Durbar Square, the former royal plaza, where the Malla kings ruled for centuries before the Shah dynasty took over in the 18th century. The square holds dozens of temples in different states of preservation. Some are well maintained and active. Others are slowly crumbling, their carved wooden beams dark with age. The 2015 earthquake damaged parts of the square significantly. Reconstruction is still ongoing in places, and some structures may never be fully restored. Walking through the area today, you see scaffolding next to centuries-old stonework. Not far from the square, Buddhanath is one of the largest Buddhist stupas in the world. The white dome sits at the center of a circular plaza, with the painted eyes of the Buddha looking out in 4 directions from the gilded tower above. Every morning and evening, monks, nuns, and local residents circle the stupa clockwise, spinning the prayer wheels mounted along the outer wall as they go. The ritual has continued here for roughly 1,500 years. Bhaktapur sits about 13 kilometers east of Kathmandu. It is a separate medieval city that has maintained its old layout more completely than the capital. Cars are restricted in the historic center, which changes how the place feels immediately. The main square is flanked by the Nyatapola Temple, 5 stories tall and built in 1702. It is the tallest pagoda in Nepal and has survived multiple earthquakes that damaged buildings around it. Local potters still work in an open square near the eastern gate, shaping clay on foot-powered wheels. The technique has not changed much. The products are sold at the same market where they have always been sold. It is one of those places where traditional craft and daily life have not separated into different categories. Paro Taktsang, known as Tiger's Nest, is built into a cliff face 900 meters above the Paro Valley in western Bhutan. It is the most recognizable building in the country and one of the more extraordinary pieces of architecture in the Himalayas. The monastery was built in 1702 around a cave where, according to Bhutanese tradition, Guru Rinpoche meditated in the 8th century after flying to the site on the back of a tigress. The story is taken seriously here. The cave itself is still a place of active worship inside the monastery complex. Getting there requires a hike of roughly 2 hours through pine and rhododendron forest. The trail gains significant elevation, and the monastery only comes fully into view near the end. At a certain point on the ascent, you cross a bridge over a waterfall and climb the final steps directly into the complex. The transition from forest trail to monastery entrance is abrupt. Inside, the halls are lit by butter lamps and decorated with murals and gilded statues. Monks conduct ceremonies throughout the day. Visitors are welcome, but the atmosphere is that of a working religious site, not a tourist attraction. The distinction matters here more than in most places. From the monastery terrace, the valley floor is visible far below, with the town of Paro and the surrounding farmland laid out in the afternoon light. The view explains why this location was chosen, though it doesn't fully explain how the building was constructed on such a narrow ledge. Punakha Dzong stands at the point where the Pochu and Mochu rivers meet, about 70 kilometers east of Thimphu. It was built in 1637 and served as the capital of Bhutan for several centuries before the seat of government moved to Thimphu in the 1950s. The building is long and white, with a central tower rising above the surrounding walls. It sits on a narrow strip of land between the two rivers, which means it is effectively surrounded by water on three sides. In spring, jacaranda trees bloom purple along the riverbanks below the walls. Punakha Dzong still functions as the winter residence of Bhutan's monastic body, which moves here from Thimphu each year when the weather turns cold. The Dzong is a working institution, not a preserved monument. Government offices, temples, and monk quarters all occupy different sections of the building. The annual Punakha Chechu festival brings large crowds to the courtyard, where monks perform masked dances over several days. The dances are religious in purpose, depicting scenes from Tibetan Buddhist history and mythology. They have been performed here every year for centuries. The surrounding valley is one of the warmest in Bhutan, low enough in elevation to grow rice and citrus fruit. Coming from the higher passes, the change in temperature and vegetation is noticeable within a short distance. Dochula Pass sits at 3,100 meters on the road between Thimphu and Punakha. On clear days, the view from the pass takes in a long section of the eastern Himalayan range, including Gangkhar Puensum at 7,570 meters, the highest unclimbed mountain in the world. Bhutan has banned all mountaineering above 6,000 meters, so it will likely remain unclimbed. The pass is marked by 108 chortens, known as the Druk Wangyal Chortens, built in 2004 in memory of Bhutanese soldiers killed in a military operation that year. The stupas are arranged in concentric circles on a hillside, white against the forest behind them. In winter, the pass is often foggy, and the stupas appear and disappear as the cloud moves through. Dochula is not a destination in itself for most travelers. It is a stopping point on the road between Thimphu and Punakha, a place where the view and the altitude combine to make people get out of the car for a few minutes. On the clearest days in winter, the snow peaks stretch across the entire northern horizon. Lhasa sits at 3,656 meters above sea level, making it the highest capital city in the world. It has been the religious and political center of Tibet for over 1,000 years, and for much of that time, it was extremely difficult to reach. Foreign travelers were banned from entering for centuries, which gave the city a reputation for mystery that it still carries in some ways. The Potala Palace dominates the city from a hill above the old quarter. Construction began in the 7th century, though most of the current structure dates from the 17th century, when the 5th Dalai Lama oversaw a major expansion. The building rises 13 stories and contains over 1,000 rooms, including chapels, libraries, and the tombs of previous Dalai Lamas. It was the winter residence of the Dalai Lama until 1959, when the 14th Dalai Lama fled to India following the Chinese military occupation of Tibet. The palace is now a museum. Visitors move through its corridors in timed groups, past rooms filled with religious artifacts, thangka paintings, and gilded stupas. The scale of the building is easier to understand from the outside, where it fills the sky above the Lhasa Valley. Below the Potala, the Jokang Temple is the most sacred site in Tibetan Buddhism. It was built in the 7th century and houses a statue of the Buddha Shakyamuni that is considered the most precious religious object in Tibet. Pilgrims travel for weeks to reach the temple, some prostrating themselves along the entire route. The Barkor, the circular street around the Jokang, is a continuous stream of people walking clockwise at almost any hour of the day. Yamdrok Lake sits at 4,441 meters, about 100 kilometers southwest of Lhasa. It is one of the 3 holiest lakes in Tibet, and from the road above it, the color of the water is immediately striking. Depending on the light and the time of year, it shifts between deep blue and a bright turquoise that looks almost artificial. The lake is large, covering roughly 638 square kilometers, and its shape is irregular, with long arms extending into the surrounding hills. From the pass above, the full extent of the lake is visible, along with the snow peaks of the Himalayan range to the south. In Tibetan Buddhist tradition, Yamdrok is considered a sacred lake and a source of protective energy for Tibet. Lamas have historically consulted the lake when searching for reincarnations of important religious figures, reading signs in its waters and surroundings. The lake is also believed to be the life force of Tibet, and there have been long-standing concerns about a hydroelectric project built on it in the 1990s. Yaks graze on the hillsides above the lake. Small villages sit at the water's edge, their houses built from stone and mud brick. Fishing boats move slowly across the surface. The landscape is open and exposed, with little vegetation at this altitude beyond low scrub and grass. Mount Kailash stands at 6,638 meters in a remote part of western Tibet, far from the main Himalayan range. It is not the highest mountain in the region, but it is considered the most sacred peak on earth by 4 separate religious traditions: Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Bon. In Hindu tradition, Kailash is the home of Shiva. In Buddhist cosmology, it is identified with Mount Meru, the axis of the universe. For Jains, it is the site where their first spiritual teacher achieved liberation. For followers of Bon, the pre-Buddhist religion of Tibet, it is the seat of all spiritual power. The convergence of 4 traditions on a single mountain is unusual in any context. No one has ever climbed Kailash. Several mountaineers have applied for permission over the years, but the Tibetan authorities have consistently refused, citing the mountain's religious significance. The form of engagement that is permitted is the Kora, a circumambulation of the mountain on foot, covering 52 kilometers at high altitude. Most pilgrims complete it in 3 days. Some cover the route in a single day, which at this elevation is a significant physical undertaking. The landscape around Kailash is stark and remote. The mountain rises from a plateau with little surrounding cover, its south face a near vertical wall of rock and ice. Lake Manasarovar lies nearby, another sacred body of water in the Hindu tradition, fed by glaciers from the surrounding peaks. Reaching Kailash requires a long journey across the Tibetan plateau. The roads are rough and the altitude is considerable throughout. Most travelers who make the effort describe the place as unlike anything else they have seen. Chitwan sits in the lowlands of southern Nepal, at the base of the Himalayan foothills. The elevation here is under 200 meters, which makes it a sharp contrast to everything that surrounds it. The jungle is dense, the air is humid, and the wildlife is completely different from anything found higher up. The park covers over 900 square kilometers and was established as a protected area in 1973. It became a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984. The main draw is the one-horned rhinoceros, which was nearly hunted to extinction in the early 20th century. Chitwan now holds one of the largest populations in the world, with over 600 individuals living within the park boundaries. Bengal tigers also live here, though they are rarely seen. The park is one of the few places in South Asia where tiger numbers have been increasing in recent years, the result of strict anti-poaching measures and habitat protection. Jeep safaris run through the park each morning and evening, following tracks through tall elephant grass and sal forest. Dugout canoes travel along the Rapti River, where gharials and mugger crocodiles rest on the banks. The bird count in Chitwan exceeds 500 species, which draws dedicated birdwatchers from around the world. The Tharu people have lived in the Chitwan lowlands for centuries, developing a resistance to malaria that allowed them to inhabit a region that was otherwise too dangerous for outsiders. Their villages sit at the edge of the park, and some Tharu communities now work in conservation and tourism. Gangotri sits in the Garhwal Himalayas of the Indian state of Uttarakhand at 3,415 meters. It is one of the 4 sites in the Char Dham pilgrimage circuit, considered the most important Hindu pilgrimage in the Himalayas. Each year, hundreds of thousands of pilgrims make the journey here between May and November, when the road is open. The Gangotri Glacier, about 19 kilometers from the town, is the source of the Bhagirathi River, which joins other rivers downstream to form the Ganges. The glacier has been retreating steadily for over a century. In the 1800s, it extended much closer to the town. Today, the walk from the road end to the glacier snout at Gaumukh takes roughly 18 kilometers each way through a high-altitude valley. The temple at Gangotri is dedicated to the goddess Ganga and sits on the bank of the Bhagirathi River. It was built in the 18th century and is the ceremonial starting point for the pilgrimage. Priests conduct rituals at the river's edge each morning, and pilgrims bathe in the cold water regardless of the temperature. The landscape above Gangotri is severe. The valley narrows as it climbs toward the glacier, with peaks above 4,000 meters on both sides. At Tapavan, a high meadow above the glacier, mountaineers establish base camps for expeditions to Shivling and Bhagirathi peaks. The meadow itself is considered sacred, and the combination of extreme natural beauty and religious significance makes it one of the more unusual places in the Indian Himalayas. Rishikesh sits at the point where the Ganges emerges from the Himalayan foothills onto the plains of northern India. The elevation here is around 350 meters, and the river runs fast and clear before it slows and widens in the flatlands below. The city has been a center of Hindu religious practice for centuries, with ashrams and temples lining both banks of the river. It attracts pilgrims, students of yoga and meditation, and travelers passing through on their way to the higher pilgrimage sites. The concentration of spiritual activity here is genuine rather than constructed for tourism, though tourism has become a significant part of the local economy. The two suspension bridges crossing the Ganges in the old part of the city are closed to vehicles. Pedestrians, cows, and the occasional monkey share the walkways. From the bridges, the river is visible both upstream toward the mountains and downstream toward the plains. Each evening, an arti ceremony takes place on the ghats at the river's edge. Oil lamps are lit and offered to the river, prayers are sung, and the lamps are set afloat on the current. The ceremony has been performed here every evening without interruption for a very long time. It draws both devout Hindus and curious visitors, and the distinction between the two groups matters less as the evening progresses. Rishikesh also marks a practical boundary in the Himalayan journey. Above this point, the mountains begin in earnest. Below it, the subcontinent stretches south for a very long way. Leh sits at 3,524 meters in the Indus Valley, surrounded by bare brown mountains on all sides. It is the main town in Ladakh, a region that was an independent kingdom for several centuries before becoming part of India in 1947. The town itself is small and manageable on foot. The old royal palace sits above the main bazaar on a rocky hill, modeled on the Potala Palace in Lhasa and built around the same period. Below it, the bazaar connects a series of streets with shops selling dried apricots, pashmina wool, and trekking gear alongside each other. Ladakh was closed to foreign visitors until 1974. The combination of its position on the border with Pakistan and China and the sensitivity of the region kept it off limits for decades after Indian independence. When it opened, travelers arrived to find a landscape and culture that had developed largely in isolation. The monasteries around Leh are among the most important in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. Thiksi Monastery, about 17 kilometers from the town, sits on a hill above the Indus Valley and contains a 12-meter statue of Maitreya Buddha built in 1980. Hemis Monastery, further east, is the largest and wealthiest in Ladakh and hosts an annual festival of masked dances each summer that draws visitors from across the region. Pangong Lake sits at 4,350 meters, about 160 kilometers east of Leh. The drive there crosses the Changla Pass at 5,360 meters, one of the highest motorable roads in the world. The lake is long and narrow, stretching roughly 134 kilometers from west to east. About 60% of it lies in Tibet. The border between India and China runs across the water, though there are no visible markings. The lake has been a point of dispute between the two countries at various times. The water changes color through the day. In morning light, it is often a deep blue. By midday, it can shift toward turquoise or green, depending on the sky and the angle of the sun. In the late afternoon, it sometimes takes on a metallic quality. The mountains behind it are dry and brown, which intensifies the contrast with the water. Bar-headed geese nest along the shores, along with Brahminy ducks and various wading birds. The geese are notable for migrating over the Himalayas twice a year, flying at altitudes that would require oxygen equipment for a human. They are one of the few species that crosses the range directly rather than through the passes. There is almost no vegetation around the lake beyond low scrub. The landscape is open in every direction. At this altitude and in this dryness, the silence on calm days is complete. Nubra Valley lies north of Leh, reached by crossing the Kardung La Pass at 5,359 meters. For many years, this was listed as the highest motorable road in the world, though that claim has since been disputed by other high-altitude roads elsewhere in the region. The valley sits at around 3,000 meters, which is significantly lower than the surrounding passes. The difference in elevation produces a microclimate that allows trees, shrubs, and even some agriculture. After the bare rock and dust of the high passes, the appearance of green vegetation is unexpected. The valley floor contains sand dunes, formed by sediment deposited by the Shak and Nubra rivers over thousands of years. Double-humped Bactrian camels live here, descendants of animals that were used on the old Silk Road trade routes that once passed through this valley between Central Asia and the Indian subcontinent. The camels are now used primarily for short tourist rides across the dunes. Diskit Monastery sits on a rocky outcrop above the valley floor and contains a 32-meter statue of Maitreya Buddha, built in 2010 and visible from several kilometers away. The monastery itself is much older, founded in the 14th century. The villages in Nubra grow apricots and vegetables in small irrigated plots. In summer, the valley is warm enough to feel almost mild by Ladakhi standards. In winter, the temperature drops severely, and many of the higher passes become impassable. Hunza Valley sits in the Karakoram range of northern Pakistan at roughly 2,400 meters. The valley is narrow and steep-sided, carved by the Hunza River over millions of years. On clear days, the peaks above it include Rakaposhi at 7,788 meters and Ultar Sar at 7,388 meters, both visible from the valley floor. The Hunza people have lived here for centuries, farming terraced fields irrigated by glacial meltwater, channeled through a network of hand-dug channels called couls. The main crops are wheat, potatoes, and fruit. The apricot orchards are particularly well known. In spring, the valley fills with blossom before the snows have fully cleared from the upper slopes, and in summer, dried apricots are spread on rooftops across the region. Baltit Fort stands above the main town of Karimabad, built roughly 700 years ago and restored in the 1990s with support from the Aga Khan Trust for Culture. It served as the residence of the Mirs, the ruling family of Hunza, until 1945. The fort is open to visitors and offers a clear view down the valley and across to the surrounding peaks. The Karakoram Highway passes through Hunza on its way between Pakistan and China. Built between 1959 and 1979 by Pakistani and Chinese workers, it crosses some of the most difficult terrain of any major road in the world. Over 800 workers died during its construction. Today, it carries trade traffic between the two countries, as well as travelers heading into the mountains. Fairy Meadows is a flat grassy area at 3,300 meters on the northern flank of Nanga Parbat. Getting there requires a jeep ride on an unpaved mountain track that most drivers consider among the most difficult in Pakistan, followed by a walk of roughly 2 hours through pine forest. The meadow gets its name from early European travelers who found the setting unusually beautiful after days of rough travel. It is a simple place. There is grass, some trees, and a direct, unobstructed view of Nanga Parbat's rocky oat face rising above. Nanga Parbat stands at 8,126 meters, making it the 9th highest mountain in the world. It sits at the western end of the Himalayan range, geographically separated from the main Karakoram peaks nearby. The mountain earned the name Killer Mountain from its early climbing history. Between 1932 and 1953, 31 climbers died attempting to reach the summit before Hermann Buhl finally succeeded in 1953, completing the final section alone and without supplemental oxygen. The Rupal face on the south side of the mountain is the highest rock face on Earth, rising 4,600 meters from base to summit in a single wall. From Fairy Meadows, the north side is visible rather than the Rupal face, but the scale is clear from any angle. Base camps for expeditions to Nanga Parbat are within walking distance of the meadow. In summer, small camps of climbers preparing for attempts on the mountain coexist with trekkers who have come simply for the view. K2 stands at 8,611 meters on the border between Pakistan and China. It is the second highest mountain in the world, and by most measures, the most difficult of the 8,000ers to climb. The summit success rate is significantly lower than Everest, and the mountain has never been climbed in winter. The name K2 comes from the notation used by the Great Trigonometrical Survey of India in the 1850s. K stood for Karakoram, and the peaks were numbered in the order they were surveyed. K1 was later given the local name Masherbrum. K2 was never given a widely accepted local name, and the survey designation stuck. Reaching base camp requires an 8-day walk from the nearest road at Ascole through the Baltoro Glacier. The glacier is 35 miles long and one of the largest outside the polar regions. The walk passes the confluence of glaciers known as Concordia, where K2 first comes into full view alongside Broad Peak and the Gasherbrooms. The scale of the Karakoram peaks gathered in this one area is difficult to absorb. K2's profile from the south is a near-perfect pyramid. From the base, it rises steeply on all sides without the gradual approaches that characterize some other high peaks. The standard route, the Abruzzi Spur on the southeast ridge, involves sustained technical climbing at extreme altitude. 61 people have died on K2, a fatality rate significantly higher than Everest in proportion to the number of attempts. The mountain's reputation is based on real statistics rather than mythology, which makes it different from peaks whose danger is sometimes overstated. The Himalayas are not a single experience. They are a collection of places that happen to share the same geological foundation, a range that runs through 5 countries, dozens of cultures, and more languages than most people could name. What connects them is the altitude, and what altitude does to everything beneath it. It shapes the weather, the rivers, the crops, the architecture, and the way people think about the world above them. The mountains are not a backdrop here. They are a condition of life. Every place in this range has been shaped by forces that are still active. The peaks are still rising. The glaciers are still moving, though most are retreating faster than at any point in recorded history. The rivers are still carrying sediment to the plains below, building the deltas where hundreds of millions of people live. The people who have lived here longest know the mountains in a way that no traveler can fully access. The Sherpa guides who navigate Everest's upper reaches, the Tamang farmers in the Langtang Valley, the Tibetan pilgrims circling Kailash, the Hunza villagers tending their apricot orchards above the Karakoram highway. All of them carry knowledge about this place that was accumulated over generations and is not written down anywhere. What a journey through the Himalayas offers is a partial view of all of this. The mountains are too large and too varied for any single trip to cover. But even a partial view is enough to understand why this range has been at the center of human imagination for as long as people have lived near it. The Himalayas are still here, still rising, still shaping everything around them. That is enough.